This is Phoenix Point, a game from the original creator of XCOM, and maybe the closest thing we'll ever get to XCOM 3. From its layered base building, to flying around the Geoscape scanning for threats, right down to the familiar grid-based combat and visual style. This really is a true spiritual successor to the modern XCOM games, but it's way more than just a clone. Phoenix Point expands the formula with more complexity, deeper systems, and an active mod scene already fixing the rough edges that may have held it back. So whether you're a returning player like me, or you've never touched it before, let's break down where the game stands today in its final form, and whether it's actually worth your time. Phoenix Point takes the classic alien invasion theme, but gives it a bit of a dark twist. The world as we know it has already fallen. Unusually high temperatures melted away the Antarctic permafrost, exposing a long dormant strain called the Pandora virus. Crabs and sea creatures mutated quickly, like something ripped straight out of Terror from the Deep, and large clouds of mist carried the virus across the globe. Overnight, entire cities of people walked into the ocean, and twisted, humanoid crab-like versions of them returned. These creatures were extremely aggressive and became known as the Pandorans to what was left of humanity. As the mist spread and society crumbled, only a handful of haven cities remained, and with them, three powerful factions rose to fill the void. New Jericho, a militarized force hell-bent on reclaiming the Earth by destroying the Pandorans with brute strength. Synedrion, a technologically advanced group that wants to rebuild a utopian society from the lessons learned in the past. And the Disciples of Anu, an eldritch religious order that believes the mist was sent from the dead god to purify humanity of its sins. Let me know in the comments which one of these factions you think you would side with. Full-on military, weird religion, or futuristic tech. Then there's the Phoenix Project, a secret government defense organization with bases all around the globe. The Phoenix Project was started after World War II to protect humanity from existential threats, but was later disbanded for political reasons. Now, as mankind sits on the brink, it's time to rise from the ashes, starting by reactivating the project, securing a base, and getting a team airborne to fight the aliens wherever they may be.
Lock and load!
How you interact and treat the three factions you encounter will play a huge part in determining the outcome. Will you defend their havens and align with their wishes to share technology and resources? Or will you lie, betray, and steal from them, taking their technology by force? You really do have the option of either path, with consequences of course. One feature that often gets overlooked is Phoenix Point actually has 5 different endings available, based on your research, relationships, and choices. I personally love that they took the time to flesh this system out, as each faction has their pros and cons, unique units and tech, and reasons to try and stay on their good side. Alongside faction choices, there's deep soldier customization. Not so much appearance-wise like XCOM, that part is actually pretty basic. Names and armor colors can be changed, but what makes this exceptional is the soldier skill trees and multi-classing ability. Mixing and matching different archetypes can create powerful combos, like a heavy sniper armed with a machine gun that can shred from long range. On top of that, individual armor types and gear can complement certain skills and playstyles to make your soldiers even more lethal. Throw in mutations, faction-specific weapons, and body augmentations to round this out, and you've got a whole lot of options to build your squad. It's easily one of my favorite parts of the game. Each recruit has an assortment of class-related skills alongside 3 randomized personal perks, things like weapon proficiencies or attribute and combat bonuses. This adds yet another layer to the build options for your troops, seeking out the recruits with the best perks to maximize their class abilities. All these options for soldier customization mean you're not just putting together a team, but instead an adaptable fighting force that fits your tactical approach. Of course, having the right soldiers isn't enough on its own. You'll also need to carefully manage your resources and economy, a much bigger part of the gameplay loop than you might think. Expanding your facilities and supporting your operations requires food, materials, and tech. I know, very precise descriptions. And on top of that, you will also need to manufacture ammunition, weapons, and equipment for all of your soldiers. The economy and focus on micromanaging your resources is where, in my opinion, Phoenix Point truly sets itself apart from XCOM. Not only do you need to keep an eye on your supply levels, but soldiers have limited inventory and carry weight, so going into missions underprepared or not having enough magazines can leave you overwhelmed and almost helpless. Throw in the loot caches you may come across, and some serious risk-reward decisions have to be made. This can snowball pretty quickly, and I've had many a campaign stopped in their tracks by simply not having resources available. For new players, I believe the scaling and complexity of balancing the economy is probably one of the biggest learning curves and sources of frustration. The most straightforward way to deal with it is by picking a faction to raid and steal from right away, but if you don't like that approach or material micromanagement in general, there is another way to tone it down or eliminate it completely that I'll talk about later. Next, what's likely to be the most familiar layer of Phoenix Point, the combat system. Don't think this is just a standard XCOM-like though. It's got plenty of tricks up its sleeve. The movement mechanics are pretty much the same, with the grid-style layout and different colors showing you the sprint distance. But there is one major improvement. Attacking doesn't automatically end your turn, and you can move or attack again after, as long as you have the AP for it. This allows for more tactical options and variation, which is never a bad thing. The real juice in combat is the free aim mechanic, allowing you to slide into first person mode and hit that perfect shot.
One shot, one kill.
This makes physical line of sight a factor and adds a whole nother layer to positioning. While it may sound like more of a gimmick than anything else, it actually goes hand in hand with another fantastic system: enemy weak points and body part targeting. Use that sniper like a sniper and disable the alien's gun hand so they can't shoot anymore. Or target specific weak spots to destroy mist sentinels and heavily armored Pandorans faster before they can do significant damage to your squad. From a strategy standpoint, this highlights that the more difficult headshots are not always the best move, allowing you to disable enemies and effectively render them mostly harmless without spending the extra AP and ammo up front. There is a downside though. Your soldiers can also be affected by body part damage, and losing the ability to shoot is not fun. Another kicker is that the Pandoran enemies won't just get harder as time goes by. They'll actually evolve alongside your tactics. Phoenix Point uses a reactive learning system. Tougher armor will cover specific weak points if you consistently target them. Relying on explosives will result in thicker plating or blast resistance, and you'll receive regular reports on the evolution of the Pandorans. The faster you tech up and progress, the faster they'll evolve to counter. This forces players to change up their approach instead of relying on one specific strategy for the entire game. Outside of your core infantry, Phoenix Point also features deployable vehicles, which can do big damage, but honestly, in the vanilla game, most of them are a bit underwhelming and clunky to maneuver around tighter areas. They don't really scale up as well as your troops, and eventually the space needed to transport them just isn't worth it. There is some vehicle customization, but unfortunately, it's wrapped into a DLC. Chaos Engines does add some amazing features, weapons, and a new vehicle that's head and shoulders better than the others. But in general, if vehicle combat is a major selling point for you, I would not play this game just for that. The real question is, if these mechanics are so interesting, why didn't Phoenix Point break out at launch? And why is it still barely brought up today? Let me explain. Like anything else, it's not without its flaws, and in my opinion, a lot of these were self-inflicted. Snapshot Games chose to crowdfund the development of Phoenix Point and had huge plans for the future, eventually hoping to turn this new world they were creating into a franchise. But the problems began when, after multiple crowdfunding runs, platforms, and pre-orders, the studio announced a surprise one-year exclusive deal with the Epic Game Store platform. When this happened, the Epic Store was still fairly new, and its exclusivity deals were highly controversial. In addition, exclusivity was never mentioned during the crowdfunding process, so it looked like Snapshot raised a bunch of money, then took a deal on the side for even more money while stiffing some of their initial supporters. Players were not happy. It also didn't help that there was a lot of DLC in the pipeline, and while it started off strong, over time the add-ons became very lackluster, some of them feeling half-baked or being more of a nuisance than anything else. Ask any Phoenix Point player if they liked Festering Skies. The Air Combat and Behemoth DLC is currently sitting at 32% positive on Steam. Looking back at it now, the massive ambition behind this game and what the studio was really hoping to do with it actually ended up causing a lot of the problems. It seems like they bit off more than they could chew, and that's likely why they took the Epic deal to begin with. Phoenix Point did come to Steam 1 year later, but the damage to the reputation was already done. To top it all off, as good as the mechanics and world are, the polish never quite got to the same level as Firaxis. Common bugs went unfixed, DLC implementation and balance was off, and the sound design at times is very hit or miss. But do these issues still matter now? Well, if you stepped away because of those things, or maybe because of the heavy micromanagement, there is hope and maybe a reason to circle back. Following again in the footsteps of XCOM, that hope comes in the form of mods. Something I don't think people understand is just how solid the modding community for Phoenix Point is. Obviously, we're not talking XCOM 2 levels with thousands upon thousands of options, but there are mods available to address most of the complaints that I've heard about this game. And the one that really stands out is Terror from the Void, an overhaul mod that transforms the entire experience, fixing bugs and even rewriting some of the story while introducing mechanics that make it feel more like a sci-fi horror game with a touch of Cthulhu. Now, not only do your soldiers have to fight off the enemies, but also the slow, creeping delirium that's eating away at their mind. Oh, and the resurrected avatars of your fallen soldiers. Besides that really cool twist on the theme, Terror from the Void also addresses many of the issues with the DLC, changing how they activate and are worked into the game. You even have the option to completely disable the air combat. Settings allow you to choose which continent you start on, different difficulties for the strategic and tactical layers, and throw in some interesting options like flinch affecting the free aim, or grenades having a damage fall off further out from the blast. This is absolutely the definitive way to experience everything Phoenix Point can offer, and feels like what the vanilla game aspired to be. But there is one major downside. It requires you to own every DLC pack to play. Fortunately, you can grab Phoenix Point and all of its DLC for cheap pretty often, which is what I would personally recommend. Don't let that put you off the game completely though. Even if you don't own or don't want the DLC, there are fantastic mods available for the vanilla game too. Custom Campaigns has a lot of similar starting options and settings to Terror from the Void, but without the add-on content. Augmentation limits can be raised, and if you aren't an economist, ammo, medkits, and supplies can be made free to manufacture. Alongside mods that buff storage and living quarter space, you can really eliminate a lot of the micromanagement layer if it's not your thing. Even small tweaks like adding more defenders to havens or the ever popular iteration of the Stop Wasting My Time mod can make a big difference, while combining these with Terror from the Void is the real secret sauce. I know that mods are not everyone's cup of tea, but in this case they truly shine because of the scope and ambition that this game has, but never managed to fully deliver on. This modding community will probably never hit XCOM numbers, but it's quietly become one of the best kept secrets in strategy gaming. Between major overhauls like Terror from the Void, new class additions like the Officer, and more still rolling out, it's clear the game has a dedicated community that refuses to let it die, and they've turned it into one of the few tactics games you can customize this deeply, if you're willing to dive in. Blend all that with vanilla Phoenix Point's already unsettling post-apocalyptic atmosphere, the Lovecraftian influences of Terror from the Void, and fighting off armies of crab aliens coming from the water, and in my head, this is XCOM 3, modern Terror from the Deep. I would have loved a sequel with more water-based exploration or some kind of throwback to those iconic cruise liner horror missions. As it stands though, this may be the only Phoenix Point we ever get, and if you're looking for the next step forward in the modern XCOM formula, albeit an often complex and brutal one, then it's definitely worth adding to your library. If you're interested in modding and want to learn more about some of the options that are available, feel free to click through to the video that's on screen now.